Well, hello everybody, and thanks for joining Concurrency as we have a conversation today about Microsoft Fabric and the modern data estate. I am blessed to be able to fill in for Nathan, who is stranded in New Jersey today. He's on the call and will be the color commentary today, whereas I normally play the color commentary role. I'm a solution architect at Concurrency. I've been here for a good 8 years and have had many decades of experience in the app dev and data space over my career. Nathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Totally. Love being color commentary today. Brian, you're a rock star. You're going to do awesome. And looking forward to talking through Fabric. So this is going to be a great conversation for the next hour. And I will also be covering the chat. So as drop them in the chat as we go, answering them throughout the session. So use the chat liberally. Love to talking about things that are important to you.
All right, so Nathan's having connection issues as he's stranded in New Jersey. So I'll just go ahead and repeat what he said because it was hard for me to hear. He's going to be monitoring the chat, which I think his bandwidth will support. And so if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and Nathan will be the one that'll be answering for you today. So I thought it would be important for us to start the conversation out, around AI and the data estate. Sam Altman had a fantastic quote talking about the importance of AI to organizations as we move through the 21st century. And years ago, when the iPhone App Store became prominent, everybody was bragging about their mobile devices, and you don't really hear that anymore. And it's just not something that people think of. You have a mobile app because you're a company that sells products and services. At this point, we went, very quickly in the last 2 years from, people scrambling about AI and how do I start using my data, leveraging my data for AI, and bragging about it to the point now where it's just expected. It's an obvious thing. It's expected that you're going to have that. So, but the reality is that most of the companies that we work with, are still, looking at ways and opportunities to incorporate AI into their product and services. And so Microsoft has developed an intelligent data platform. And this is really meant to kind of bring cohesion to this story. And what's interesting to me, and what we'll kind of be talking about throughout the course of this webinar today, is that in order to build out an intelligent data platform, there's 4 pillars that you really need to consider. Obviously, there's the data and how you handle data, from different database technologies that are going to perform and be optimized. There's the security components, like how do I protect my data, make sure that the information that I'm serving into an AI platform isn't being used for malicious purposes or doesn't, expose some of my private information. The AI components, and then finally, when you think about Fabric, clearly it's going to be in the analytics space. But the most compelling reason to think about Fabric is that if you deploy Fabric for your environment and start building a data platform just using Fabric, you're actually touching on all 4 of these pillars. Right out of the gate, you get essentially an intelligent data platform, not with all the bells and whistles. You're going to need some other components, but with Fabric, you can actually have a modern data estate. And so taking a look at the history of data platforms. So I advanced my screen. Let's look at like how we've kind of evolved, over the course of the last couple of decades. At the beginning, we were just dealing with Excel spreadsheets and files and file folders. People had pretty kludgy, ways of dealing with the data, and it became really apparent that we needed to have a process that could centralize the data. Cloud wasn't a thing, so we're doing all this on premise using archaic ETL tools like SSRS and SSIS. So generally it was pretty slow. It was single threaded. You couldn't have multiple jobs running at the same time on an SSIS server. So we started to solve that problem as we moved our workloads into the cloud. And Data Factory allowed us to do things like multi-threaded ETL processes, but it also kind of changed the paradigm as more data services became available to us. So, we moved from like an ELT to an from ETL to an ELT, where in the next, step, which is kind of about a year, 2 years ago, we were doing lake houses, and that was kind of like the big concept, that everybody was jumping to. Let's centralize this data lake houses. We can, move these to a medallion architecture, and build out data meshes that are aligned to our data domains. What's interesting, for us here at Concurrency and with Microsoft is that Fabric brought this all as software as a service. So now you get your data estate as a deployable unit, and you can start building on those lake houses. You can manage your ELT processes, and build out like your silver, bronze, and gold patterns directly in the platform. So it's been it's been a great journey, and Microsoft was kind of the first one to get to that state. So let's have a little bit of a frank discussion about like why this is such a good move on Microsoft's part. And I'm not advancing my slides very, very well. Nathan, you're the expert at this. There we go. So, Microsoft has been dominating the consumption layer, whether you're on Snowflake, or other, data warehouse platforms. A lot of the consumption still actually happens in Azure. Many people are deploying those units there. And SQL as a product, SQL Server as a product, or SQL services have always been like a predominant data platform for most enterprise systems. But on the analytics space, there was, a lot of competition. And, let's face it, Tableau, since Salesforce acquired them, it's not the same product anymore that it was. And you're seeing a lot of organizations, whether their data is in AWS or GCP or Azure, people have been using Power BI because it's just such a fantastic tool. So in the cloud infrastructure game, though, Microsoft was competing head to head with, everybody else. But by making it a SaaS platform, they're doing something that nobody else is doing, at this point. And if you've noticed, when you, as a Power BI user, building in Power BI, you've noticed that the URL has changed. It's now Fabric. So everybody who is a Power BI user is essentially a Fabric user now. You're starting to get used to the tooling that's available to you. And it makes it simpler than the competition by allowing you to deploy a capacity and inherently get all the tools that you would normally, have to deploy independently. And finally, with Copilot coming out, that tool is starting to mature, very quickly, and features are rolling out for people that have the appropriate SKUs. And that's making the data analytics space even easier to use for the end users, which is the goal for Fabric. So, some of the big reasons for us to consider a software as a service data estate, for me, the biggest one is the, cost optimization and the efficiency based on the run rate. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in there. But there's also the ease of use, ease of getting the value from your data as we set up data domains and have data stewardship, including data lineage. All these are going to make getting access to the data pretty easy for users that wouldn't traditionally have direct access to the data points. Also, with the SaaS product, things happen. You don't have to upgrade things. You get those benefits in the cloud, but you also have to manage, like, are we going to go to this new system over here? If I want to switch over from one data consumption layer to another data consumption layer, I have to rewrite tools. With a software as a service, you're getting innovation in real time. When Microsoft deploys it, it deploys it. Some, key things to think about right now is like, even we're seeing this right now with Synapse. Synapse is not getting the features as fast as Fabric, which is underlying got Synapse components to it as well. So it's clear Microsoft is making a lot of investment in this Fabric platform. So you're getting access to that innovation much quicker if you're building in Fabric at this point. And then the data lineage I alluded to. Once you start building in Fabric and you can start to tag your data appropriately, that lineage stays within the ecosystem. So regardless of what layer that you're using, if you're using your gold or bronze or silver, you can inspect and interrogate that data and see exactly where it came from and who signed off on it, what data owners are responsible for it. And finally, the last point is around the real-time data access. This is something that's really maturing very, very quickly in the last 3 months. If you read the blogs, they're making improvements on the real-time data. I saw a couple of announcements over the last week that there's some stuff that's coming out to increase the amount of sources that they can replicate in real time. So really interesting stuff going on in Fabric. And the fundamental why of it is it's software as a service. And I seem to be frozen. Maybe not. I hope I didn't jump too many screens. So Fabric provides complete analytics Fabric with the best of breed capabilities across your analytics workload. At the end of the day, it's really an open layer. It has no proprietary lock-ins. You can use it with a variety of different data sources. It's built on that lake-centric and open kind of data experience. And it also delivers like AI copilots to accelerate your productivity, help you with discovering insights, and enable you to create custom, AI solutions directly, from this platform. But let's dive a little bit deeper into the complete analytics platform. We talked a lot about the SaaS. When you get into the Fabric ecosystem, as as a user working in your workspace, you have everything available to you with the caveats of what permissions you have. But users can have access to everything within that system. You can build out your data factory components to bring your data in. You can manage the data. You have data governance components that you can assign tags to, and it really becomes a unified platform. So the Power BI user having access to the real-time analytics, having access to Data Factory, Data Synapse. To me, this is like a huge benefit to the platform, that you don't have to jump around between different tools. You don't have to ask your IT department, like, hey, I'm in the Azure portal. I can't get into Data Factory, can't look at the logs. You're just doing that all within the single ecosystem. But it's also based on like the OneLake, aspect of it. So OneLake is a fully functional data lake. Lakehouse is kind of the architecture that it was built on. And every time that you provision your workloads, your workspace, you're provisioning the ability to use a new instance of OneLake and organize your data. The data is intuitively organized, within that ecosystem, and within that workspace, you're managing it. The data is automatically indexed. You get your labeling and lineage. You can enable things like PII scanning to apply automated labels to it, and then you can manage sharing and the governance, right out of the Lakehouse. The other benefit to this is that you get one copy of the data for all your computes. You don't have to move the data around once it's in the OneLake. This is all handled for you, and you do have access to it as well, right? So there's API access to your data. You can export or work with it in Parquet files. But it is, the source of truth is in a single point in the Lakehouse. And you don't have the, need to import and export anymore. The other part about this is that the compute engines are fully optimized to work within this ecosystem. So the levers that you used to have to pull, in order to support your workloads are things that you no longer have to manage independently. As an example, do I need to scale up this component because I've got, a large, a large data extract that's coming in because I'm onboarding a customer. It's a managed capacity across it, so you no longer have to worry about how to optimize your data. So one copy is basically a new feature that came out, and you can get shortcuts to your data through OneLake, so you're not actually moving this. This is something that's relatively new, actually very new. We haven't done a tremendous amount of work other than POCs with it. But the nice part about moving this data is that you can support not only your Azure data and your on-premise data, because that's typically where people are looking at how to get my on-premise data into Fabric, but it also supports shortcuts to your data in AWS, in GCP. I was working with a customer just last week that was talking about using Fabric as their analytics platform. But all of their data sits in AWS, or at least over 90% of it sits in AWS. So, but they felt it was a compelling enough reason to have this SaaS platform, knowing that I don't actually have to physically move all my data over the wire on a constant basis in order to get the benefits of it. So it really is a multi-cloud data estate. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the concepts of the data domains, but important to kind of call out before we move through, into the deeper dive of some of this, is that there's the concept of domains, and being able to assign data to the different and then align it with the different business units, such as your finance department owns the data stewardship of the data that comes out of their department. That the data is going to be secured and governed in one place, and they control as the data owners, who has access to the data and what source of truth, how to define the source of truth. Also, with this being a SaaS product, you don't really have to worry as much about where the data resides. It can reside in different regions without having to manage your different storage accounts. And it vastly simplifies the implementation for IT, in that respect. So let's talk a little bit about, the business users as well. So Data Activator is a system of detection. It lets your business subject matter experts monitor all your data in the cloud, and they can use the familiar experiences of Fabric, to model that data and define the changing conditions in the data that they want to look for. The Data Activator sends notifications, kicks off workflows, and can even reach directly into operational systems to optimize how your business runs. So leveraging, connecting data from your teams to your Power BI is becoming an easier thing. And then, the big, sizzle, I guess, if you want to say that, is, the AI stuff. So the Copilot features that are coming out that have been released in Power BI and Fabric specifically allow you to do much more than just write SQL queries, using a Copilot, but also really inspect and interrogate your data and find trends, that would be available. And so you get a lot of data AI-driven data insights. All right, so universal compute. It's a big factor in Fabric. So it's all in one, and it is hard to plan for. Concurrency has a handy little spreadsheet that can help organizations sort of plan out some of the capacity. But at the end of the day, when you provision a Fabric at Microsoft Fabric, you're provisioning a specific capacity, and that comes in order of magnitudes of two. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? But you basically deploy a capacity unit, and then you don't have to necessarily worry about if I have one job that's taking up more than the other. All that's going to get balanced out in the nodes. It's similar to like Power BI capacities, but that was very specific in those workloads. This takes care of all the other components as well. Nathan, I've seen a couple of questions coming up. Is there anything that you need me to stop and touch on?
Big question is on the Fabric cost scale management. Like if it scales outside of, like you're doing auto scaling on it on Fabric, it scales to some level that you weren't expecting. How does that fit into capacity management?
Yeah, so I think that calculator that I talked about, it's got 30 or 40 different inputs that help you kind of plan for your max capacity unit, and would assist organizations in figuring out what the correct sizing for the organization is. You're not going to run into the same kind of situations you would run in with SQL Server, as an example of data contentions. You might get some things slow down a little bit as the capacity is throttling some of the transactions. But at the end of the day, you're limited on that capacity skew. And it is kind of hard to calculate. It's not it's an art, definitely not a science. That's something that we can definitely help with. So next question here really quick. Can we speak to the security of the proprietary data Copilot offers, right? It's secure within the company. Sure, I'll go ahead before we move on and talk about that very, very succinctly. Your data, in terms of Copilot, is your data, and Microsoft is very adamant about that. They do not use any of your information outside of the service boundary. Period. End of story. So that data security, they draw a very strict line around your tenant, and your data is your data. It's not used to train any other models, unless you've explicitly given them access to it or permission to do so. So hope that helps.
That's the same basic thing that you think about with even Office 365. Like,
yep.
They're not training some broad model on your Office 365 emails that go back and forth. There's a SLA guarantee. There's a contract that you signed that enforces that.
Yeah, absolutely. We are doing relatively okay on time, but I do want to keep this moving along. Keep the good questions coming. Those are some fantastic questions, by the way. So there's been a lot of talk about, well, we just had a couple of questions about security here, so let's go ahead and dive a little bit into that too, right? So on the Fabric side, you get the data ownership. You get you get the ability to manage who's going to have access to your data. You have the ability to tag your data, and have that level of scrutiny. But it works seamlessly with Microsoft Purview to take that to the next level, right? So you can keep your data safe and governed, like you would have done with Purview, and have a more integrated, more integrated experience around that. To maybe dovetail off of this a little bit, we've been doing a lot of smaller Fabric adoption engagements at Concurrency, And this is exactly where we start people's fabric journey, is paying a lot of attention to the data governance before we actually start getting into a position to load the data. It's like literally step one. So how do we do that? There's some more slides that dive a little bit deeper into this, but again, you've got that centralized, OneLake data hub where all your data is going to be flowing through. You have data domains and data owners that are going to create endorsements, on that data before it's accessible to other business units or other users. We make sure that we have data lineage defined, and where necessary, we're doing metadata scanning on the data to extract, key PII or PHI information, and make sure that we add sensitivity labels to it, before it's going through its consumption process. So the OneLake Data Hub, is a place where you can not only move your data, but it's also a place for you to discover your data. So other users that you have enabled or given permission to discover that data will be able to go to the data hub and find a version of the information that they're looking for. It's indexed, it's searchable, and the data owners are the ones that have controlled who has access to it. So that's a fantastic tool. But before we talk about the data, before we go too much further on the data ownership, I definitely wanted to spend a little bit of time. Nathan and I were talking about this this morning, really kind of taking a step back and making sure that everybody understood what data domains are. So the concept of data domains is that the data usually in organizations lives within the operating units within the business. So, obviously there's going to be some executive or financial kind of oversight for the health of the company. But there's going to be other areas where manufacturing or sales or other digital assets are going to have their own data sets that really don't necessarily relate to each other very easily. And so we help organizations kind of define what those business units, how are we going to organize that data into individual pillars for consumption. When we do that, we can actually assign owners to that. And doesn't have to necessarily be a technical person or a business person. It could be a blend of both. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a throat to choke about, is this data correct? And are we satisfied with that data being shared with other business units within the organization? So this really addresses value-driven use cases about how to use the data. And then once you have the owners, they control all these other components, certifying the data sets, setting up the policies, who's got the visibility to it. And they might do that differently for business consumers as they would for people who need access to more of the raw data. And that's the beauty, of the Fabric ecosystem, is because the Lakehouse has all that data with the lineage attached to it. So now we can talk a little bit about the endorsements. So data owners, their primary responsibility, is to manage this data. But at the end of the day, they certify the data set and endorse it at the highest level of value and quality, for consumption for business users. Only the authorized users can certify the data set. So that means that that data domains quality standards are aligned to that individual or individuals' quality metrics. And when you do endorse them, they get higher visibility in the Fabric ecosystem. So they'll be prioritized as people start to search for things. So if you're searching for new customer and a new customer as defined by finance is different than sales, and sales has endorsed theirs. Finance hasn't. That's probably what you're going to wind up getting is the one that's been endorsed. So the data lineage we talked to, and here you can see on the screen directly from Fabric what that actually looks like. So as you start to look at the data, you can see where it, if you're looking at your platinum level, this is the best of the best data. Sometimes that's rolled up in multiple different data sets. And you can actually dive into it and see where did this data come from, what transformations did it go through, and how did it get to the state that it's at. This allows you to kind of troubleshoot where some of the mistakes might have happened. I switched banks 6 years ago, but now I went back to my that bank that I was at in the last decade, and they treated me as a new customer. But is that really the case? And how do I fix that data that's broken? And then the metadata scanning. So there's APIs available that help to scan the data, and that will help with assigning tags for sensitive data as well. And then this can all be done with integrated into your AD account using service principals. And it also has a lot of support for third-party tools. We talked a little bit about the Fabric capacity. I've got a couple of slides here that'll give you a little bit more detail, so you can take a couple of notes. But at the end of the day, like the purpose here is to kind of simplify the purchasing. You deploy a capacity unit. You can scale that up when you need to. Most people start at a pretty small SKU and then ramp up as they need it. But sometimes you walk into the situation knowing that like you are going to need a higher level SKU. But it can be used for any of the workloads, once you purchase the capacity. So you've got multiple workspaces, but it's all tied to a single Fabric capacity unit. And that's shared across the different workloads that you might have created within your organization. You still have the ability to create different Fabric capacities. There's nothing that would limit you from doing that, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can actually share that cost across multiple different lines of business. And then it's transparent. You can see where the consumption is coming, like which services are using more. Do I need to split that workspace out into its own Fabric capacity unit? And you have those monitoring tools to be able to do that. So I mentioned like it's in the scale of twos, the capacity units. This takes into consideration the number of transactions, the number of transformations that you're making, what kind of analytics you might actually be performing against it. All those metrics kind of go into it, and it gives you a we'll kick out like here's the Fabric capacity unit. There's a big savings with the reservations. I mean, it's 40%. So absolutely, if you know that you're going to be going in Fabric long term, definitely do the reservation pricing. You'll save quite a bit of money. It does get a little bit pricey. We're going to talk about Copilot here, but just for reference, if you're thinking about Copilot as you look at this screen, the minimum capacity unit to turn Copilot on is the F64 SKU. So it's on the reservation price, it's roughly around $5,000 a month. But there's a lot of other benefits that come with a F64 SKU and higher. So a good example is that once you get to F64, sharing those Power BI with external users becomes a little less complicated from a licensing perspective. Yeah, Nathan's calling me out for rushing through this. I'll talk a little slower so that we will have less time for questions. It's just a joke, just a joke. So what about the other costs, right? There's some storage costs that might come into play here as well. They're actually really small. We haven't seen organizations have a big bill for having a big data footprint. I mean, we're talking about a couple of pennies per gigabyte per month, for storage. It just is, it just isn't something that happens. There is some base. You get, maybe 500 gigs of data storage, maybe a terabyte of data storage, with your Fabric capacity unit that you bought, kind of based on which SKU you go with. But anything above and beyond that, these are the charges for it. So they're not currently charging for any ingress or egress, but there could be data transfer charges, through other appliances that you might have deployed to support the ecosystem. But those wouldn't be directly in Fabric at this point. So we didn't talk a lot about the AI part about it, but I would kind of want to go all the way back to the beginning, and just call out that as you as an organization are starting to look at this data and AI journey, that you consider Fabric as a platform because of the breadth of tooling that is already enabled and the ease of deployment, for the organization. So. Do we have any other questions that I didn't cover and I went way faster than Nathan does? All right, so next steps. We would love to have a one-on-one conversation with your organization if you want to find out a little bit more. So we're offering a free data platform strategy session to anybody that wants it. And we can talk about the benefits in detail as it applies to your organization of Fabric, or if there's other things that you want to consider as well. And also as people start to think about the data and AI journey, we would love to have an AI envisioning session. These are a lot of fun for the organization, and it's a lot of fun for Concurrency to take you through that journey. Also, I think Amy is going to drop in a survey here in the chat. And so if you have an opportunity to fill that survey out, we'd really love to get your feedback. If you really love this talk, let us know. If you really hated this talk, that's fine. I've got thick skin. Let me know how I can do a little bit better next time. And I did see one question.
Yeah, the question is, are there any push-down optimization options that would provide cost savings by minimizing compute on the platform?
What I've been recommending with our customers is to plan out your capacity effectively, and so that you don't have to, do a lot of push up or push down, on a regular basis. And then you can maximize some of those minimize the costs on your deployment. That's the strategy that we've been taking because of the virtues of how the capacity units work at scale. You can balance out some of those workloads. So you typically would try to, find a more balanced capacity unit, and then scale up if you need to. That's the approach that most of our customers are taking right now. But that's an excellent question. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, please fill out that survey before you leave. We would love to hear from you, and absolutely would love to meet with your organization if you're interested. Thanks, everybody.